board, staff, parents. And I just think that you're being of your own priority by doing this work, by meeting, putting up the governance score, focusing on how we work as a team together, how you work as a group of 5 board members. I think it's just exciting. Last Friday we had an amazing professional presentation for all of you on Thursday. Again, part of that commitment to professional growth and development as an organization. And so I just want to compliment you as we get started today on your commitment to that professional growth and development. I think it provides leadership, provides that we're all learners. We all should be. So with that, the chapter 2 is the trustee governance mindset. And so there's lots to talk about. We've got this short hour together. But what does it mean to have a governance mindset? What I really love to hear us start this talk about. The whole chapter is about the governance mindset. And the book says all members of the board had to do the job of governing. All members of the board had to be effective, not just a few. All trustees have to be leaders working together towards the same goal. And then second, this, I'm not by the way, I'm on page 30. This understanding is what we are calling the governance. And of course it goes through. So I would just love to open up the floor to hear what in your mind, as you don't maybe not even necessarily look at chapters or material, what did you walk away with saying, this is the governance mindset? And if we can, making sure we pass the mic. Who'd like to start? I want to start. Trustee Nassar. I say we just pass this one. That's awesome.
Okay, that's fine. Whoever wants to speak.
I really enjoyed this chapter. And I think reading it in connection also with what we did with collaboration and working together and everything, right, for the staff professional development. I highlighted just then, and I feel I love the part about if you give a note to superintendent, if you give a trustee a hose, they'll be on the front line. And I really kind of felt like that, especially because I had a gathering for some of the people, the staff from Sierra House who were leaving, going out to other things. We did that after the professional development. And so I got a lot of, one of the things that they talked about on Friday and in here is trusting each other. And knowing that we can't be in charge of or have so much knowledge like Andrea does and, budget, finance, all that stuff. That one section that the women wrote about comparing a school district to a major corporation was just like, wow, that's so true. So you have to trust where the information comes from. And so I'm feeling good about
it. Again, I appreciate what basically that thought that, hey, listen, we can't know everything about this. Come on and trust our experts. And that trust is a major component of having the governance. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the chapter. I think it's really about that kind of big picture, like you said, being sort of moves, above, yeah, kind of that 20,000 foot view, and really, as Larry always says, focusing on kids, what's best for kids. But really, I think we've done a good job as a board to have these goals that are much more, strategic in terms of improving kids' abilities, across the board from every level. So to me, a governance mindset is really just keeping that focus in mind, the focus in this broad way around our goals and, and supporting the staff and the district and each other, in sort of, being on the same page and sort of making sure everything's in alignment and, moving in the direction we want it to, you know. So governance mindset is really that more of a broader systems thing, you know, broader perspective and support, you know. And I don't know exactly how we always do that, but most of it is that support. Like I'm looking at the book in terms of saying supporting staff and creating a positive organizational culture. And just kind of remembering that in order to really govern, you know, you need to kind of always keep that in mind, that people are going to do best if they're being supported and encouraged.
You started with thinking about, hey, just being up here at a high level. Sometimes I might say, hey, you guys are at the 50,000 foot level. It's funny, so I'll say, hey, I'm at the 30,000 foot. Sometimes I dive deeper. But why I share that is that because we have staff that have responsibilities. And so the board, in essence, does set those directions and priorities, right? Those goals. And then from your superintendent down through the staff that are really close at that level are doing it. The book, and Peter Senge, they refer to, talks about being at the balcony, right? In essence, you don't be down on the dance floor.
Hey, just checking on your phones.
What about our phones?
Microphones,
Yeah, can you hear
checking
us?
on them.
Yes.
I could only see some of what Val said.
Oh.
I haven't been looking since then.
Okay,
All right, I thought our mics were working, but because we can hear the sound in the room.
well, I've had to reboot 2 switches to try and fix things. I'm still,
All right, we're gonna keep moving forward, though. Thank you. So I appreciate what, you know, you're talking about that. We're at that balcony level. We're setting direction. So thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess pull it close enough to.
I think the most important thing that I got out of this was, as I was going through, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I think I get this. I've been on this a long time. It took me a long time to get this far. And then I went through another thought of where is it that I'm not realizing that I'm doing the things that I'm not supposed to be doing? So, you know, I had this sort of second layer of, you know, yeah, I get this. But the second layer was, am I being critical enough of myself to really see where I might not be doing all that I would like to be doing?
You know, I think that's really appreciate that you brought that up, right? Because sometimes it's hard for us. It's like, well, that's somebody else's doing. But kind of look in the mirror. Am I taking on the governance mindset? Am I, you know, in this chapter, I think really does a nice job laying out these 4 different areas that it talks about. And really being able to self-reflect and even when I come down here to this part of the note taker gave you, government is a systems job, and high performing trustees are systems thinkers. What is a system thinker? But it comes down, what is the difference between macro level and micro level? I think that was a good area to also kind of assess, where am I working from on that level? When do I get into micro versus macro? I love the analogy of the helicopter, the fire, you know, it's where, and when do I jump down when I shouldn't be holding fire hose? So I appreciate that. Self-reflection is really important. And that self-reflection is really important so that I think when we think about the governance mindset and an effective board, it talks so much about being a team that really you have to have all the board members functioning at that level. If you're not willing to do self-reflection, then you know you might be the one that might be causing some challenge or some issues that you're not willing to kind of identify that. So thank you.
I love that one part that on page 47 that says they were asked 3 questions. First one, what was it about them that led you to such success as a leader? And the answers were visionaries, courageous, consensus builders, ethical, wise. Then the second question, what about leaders who left negative legacies? Leaders, people could not wait until their could not wait until they left their office or board. Answers were arrogant, dominating, manipulative, unethical, dishonest, divided. Finally, a third question, which list are you on? You know, it's like, oh, well, of course I want the first one. But that's that thing asking yourself, okay. Sometimes I mess up, you know?
You know, I appreciate you jumped over to manner, right? Because it's a really easy concept to look at as we think about manner. You know, how we communicate, what our body language says, all of those things drop into the manner. And then you were to think about how are you coming off? How are you? I have to do it pretty regularly, right? As a superintendent, you got to check yourself a lot, making sure that you know, how's that interpretation? Important. Thank you.
I'll go.
Yeah.
That's fine. I have no problem. What I got out of actually the first two concepts, the governance mindset as well as, you know, the system thinkers. And I'm going to agree with Trustee Turnbull. A lot of times in life, unless you make something a habit, you're not sure whether you're doing it well. And I think as far as systems thinking has to be a habit. It has to be about we, and it has to be about, okay, how can we govern in a system that works? Okay, I'm a systems guy. I like systems. I fish with a system. I live with a system. I taught with a system. I coached with a system. So the thing I like about the book, it is telling you to take a risk and develop a system as a governance board and follow it. And that's the most important thing. Make it a habit. So if we're questioning whether we're doing it or not, we're probably not doing it all the time. I think that's what you were trying to say. And I think that was really brave to say, by the way. So that was the first part of this that I got, that we have to be system thinkers, but we got to make it into a habit. And our governance has to be sort of a systematic job. And we've got to follow it. And if we do that, I think we'll get a lot done.
Well, one of the things that in the book, on just page 30, right towards the middle, second half, it says it says developing this mindset first often requires a shift in thinking. We call this shift moving from I to we. And remember that this is a system that we're leading, a system that we have to here. Page 30, basically third paragraph down, last sentence, is that when we think about a system, we're part of a system. We're not an individual in that system. In essence, we've got to be that functioning systematic group. So that's where I kind of started with that, right?
So we.
It's a we.
Dance, though.
It's a dance.
Oh, here
I know it's painful. We're gonna get Mike, but it's okay.
It's a dance because we also look for leadership.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of art to it.
Sure. Because why don't you explore your thinking on this? So you say it's that dance. Where's that art and challenge?
Well, in leading, you're stepping out from the rest of the group. And I think the point is to be that consensus builder, perhaps, and the listener, and to understand where, you have potentially a wonderful thing to offer the group. But you need to bring the group along. And so you have to be simultaneously that courageous leader, but also just still part of that group. And to do that, I think takes a delicacy that some of us are more gifted with than others.
I appreciate you wanting to keep it saying. I was with you, but I just want to make sure.
You know, one of the things that this talk about is every trustee is, which I mean, when I look back, I'm like I really had to chew on that because we are all leaders just in different ways. And I guess for me, like watching the history of the school board since my kids first joined this district is we had people that clearly were not leaders on the board, but they still gave and made changes. So when I was reading that, I was thinking, I mean, we do all as individuals, we are all leaders, first off, because I mean, the obvious we stepped up into this role. But just the way we are individually does make us a team of we in different fashions of leadership. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think what I'm taking from that statement is that we each bring our individual thinking, our individual background experience, knowledge, who we are to this group, and that provides that individual leader to the five, right? And then I think that the challenge there then is how do we blend those individual experiences, knowledge, background, desires, and bring that into the whole functional team. I think that's one of the keys, because I think that when I've observed boards over the years, that when someone brings their personal experience, expertise, desire, drive, and can blend that together with other four people, so, right? Because then all of a sudden, you have that value of your knowledge and your experience and understand. I think that's where you were going, Bonnie, with how does that dance together with everybody else, right? So yeah, absolutely. Because if you bring that individualism and that knowledge and that base, and how you bring it together is the key to successful work.
I would add, the way I look at it, all of us have some uniqueness about ourselves. And that uniqueness, and I'll go back to last Friday. That's what Nicole Anderson was trying to tell everyone, that every child is unique. Every human being is unique. To get on that plane where you will trust people, that's words and actions and so forth and so on, that's the hard part, okay? That's the hard part, because sometimes in the book, it goes into this, certain things will create certain situations. But I think if that we all think in terms that everybody on the board has uniqueness that can help move us forward, then I think we'd be fine.
Yeah, moving, it just moved the conversation, because in that next piece, we're going to talk about systems thinking. So if we take the conversation of, hey, we all have bringing this unique, our unique self to the board. We all experience our life knowledge, our interests. Top of page 35. Systems thinking should be in the service of something, right? Moral imperative of improving learning for all students relative to educational outcomes be the essential surviving and thriving in ever more complex societies. When I read that, I said, so if we think about this, we all come together, but as a governing board of education, that moral imperative about, hey, we're in this to, in the end, make a great system for students and their learning. And how do we do that? And this chapter obviously talks about building that governance mindset is how we do that. But it's really understanding that you're functioning from that moral imperative side of things as that group of governance. Other thoughts? I can keep us moving. I just want to make sure it provides you an open opportunity to share your thinking.
I think for me, on the bottom of page 34, where it starts, actions are not taken in isolation. The system thinker understands that everything is connected to everything else. The goal of systems thinking is to take those actions that will most positively influence the system as a whole. At the same time, every action has a reaction. That is, every action will produce some desired results and almost certainly unintended consequences elsewhere in the system. I tagged that. I also actually tagged the next paragraph that you refer to. But I like that this points out how it is all neat. It's like a spider web. And I just felt like that was, I mean, sometimes it is hard as a trustee to be in the mindset that we are looking at the greater good instead of like in the mindset of our individual life. Like it is two different elements. And I just felt like that was a good reminder that it is all connected. Yeah, that just resonated.
We are here for that collective good, and that's how we bring that together.
I just wanted to add that when you mentioned Brandy, I think the fact that everything's connected, makes sense to me. And I think the other thing that really when you read it, it really, I was really emphasizing it again, was this notion that taking the actions that will most positively influence those things. Like there's so much within the system that we all have different approaches or goals or ideas or, priorities, but that's a good reminder, I guess, for me, is to think about, what actions are, because they're going to have a reaction and there's going to be maybe unintended consequences. That seems like that's connected to being intentional or thoughtful about our priorities and thinking about the system as a whole. It's all connected, but knowing that if we pull on one thing, it may impact something else. And, and I think it was helpful the other day at the agenda item that was on curriculum, on the schedule, right? Because I think all of us would like to have all the curriculum updated quickly and as soon as possible, but this kind of recognition that, we can't do it all, and how do we kind of have a logical way of doing it and to get the best results, and linking it to the professional development. And it's sort of like this whole, that's maybe that's part of the deep learning piece we're going to get to too, is about, understanding how complex some of this is and how it all can't be done at once, and all the different, elements of it. So.
Well, the book identifies, right? We can't expect you as board members to know everything about everything. And so that's what's so important about setting goals and priorities. And then as the book talks about it, is that then it's staff's job to move forward, to make that a reality, and provide you the learning you need for those areas, providing that information, good information, and processing through that, right? That's that staff's responsibility.
And he also talks in there, which I think is very important, is that each of us have to have trust that the district office is going to give us the correct information, right? That's huge, especially in today's world of misinformation, okay? And then we carry that as, it's the old adage that knowledge is power, okay? The more we learn about certain things, the better off. We had a speaker on Friday who was talking about collaboration, and what I got out of that was that if you can make collaboration positive, good things are going to happen. It's when collaboration turns negative. No, I don't want to do that. I don't believe in that. And you get that negativity going. I think that when you connect what you guys both you were talking about, connect those dots, there's a lot of satisfaction in that. And we followed the system, we followed the chain of command, we've done A, B, and C, but we try not to hinder and let the experts do their job. And I think that's part of that system as a whole.
Yeah, I'm going to put an elephant out in the room for you just a second on that too. Because oftentimes public will think, why are they working so, why are they just being so nice to them? Why are they just voting 5-0? And I feel like going, well, do you understand? An effective school district requires a team of people work highly effective together. It's not about creating this discomfort in discourse, but it is requiring highly effective collaboration. It's positive. And in that collaboration, going back to staff, is providing the accurate, pertinent information to help you collaborate on. See, that's where I would say, when people say, oh, you're just voting yes, so you're just gonna do whatever that Todd Keller says. Well, no, that should not be the way that works. But it is that we have goals and we have direction, and we're working that together. And then we count on staff to provide this information, and then a platform for us to effectively, highly effectively collaborate as a team. Because when you don't have that team, that's when things fall apart. And remember, you are the ultimate leaders who people look to is how's the governance team working effectively. So to go to what President Riley was talking about, here we are having a professional development on Friday about effective collaboration. Well, what if you're the opposite of effective collaboration? It's not being a good role model. So effective collaboration is building consensus, is understanding we have different thoughts and opinions, but we work through those to build our goals and aspirations.
Really 2 points. The first, I have to say, I deeply appreciate the structure that you have set up for us because it feels like we have multiple opportunities to dialogue. You often make clear to us when things, where communications will wind up, who can hear what and will hear what or however. And we have a sense of you valuing our input. There's an opportunity for all of us to change our minds. And we see the impact through you or through the system. It's visible to us. And but that fosters the feeling of trust and that our individual leaderships matter.
Yeah, and I'm gonna use a word I used with somebody last week, that your individualism provides some influence in the direction of the thing, right? It's not that you have, in essence, power to just do this, but you have the ability to influence through that collaborative dialogue, those conversations that we're having, building the consensus. That's how that happens. Love it. Right?
And I wanted to make a second point that I think we have to be always aware that we fundamentally need each other, that when there are experts all throughout this district that know more about any of us on anything at any time, right? And to have that humility to always know that you might have an opinion and it may be worth talking about that. But and when it comes to the end, we have to trust that there are people that have made this their life's work and they're very good at what they do. So I really respect that expertise.
So everything's open, but I'll ask this question. It's not my own, that's right as well. What is the difference between strategic thinking and strategic planning? Not so important piece. We think about strategic focus, but why I asked the question is a little bit about staff versus board, right? And sometimes boards, elected officials think the strategic planning is our job. And if you think about the book, it says a little something. So I'm just kind of curious about your thinking.
I'm going to just jump into that one because it was really helpful for me to read that because of the 30 years I worked for the state of California, and I received a lot of training on strategic planning, and it was really helpful. Well, for me to remember, oh yeah, I used to do that. And strategic planning really is, and I did it for some nonprofits too when I was just volunteering. But strategic planning really is kind of the nuts and bolts of who's going to do what. I mean, it's like I can remember all the charts on the wall and everybody, doing their dots, and it can be about setting some priorities, but it like, what are your goals, what are your priorities, and then who's going to do it and how are we going to divide up the work. But it's strategic planning really is this kind of like detailed plan that lays out goals and objectives and priorities, who's going to do what, who's going to measure what, how are we going to, at the end of 5 years, where are we going to be, what's our vision, and how are we going to accomplish it. So a strategic plan has all those elements, and clearly that's not what we're doing because we're the board, and that's the stuff we expect district staff to do. And so the strategic thinking really is just setting the rest of the district on a course to accomplish a common vision. So I think we as board members have the ability to help set that vision, and that's kind of what we have done already. But it's really the strategic thinking piece is us really deciding what are some of the most important things we want to accomplish, and what's really important to us from a value statement, kind of, what do we value and what's our vision. And then, we hand it off to these people who really figure out, how best to get that done and who's going to be there and, how all that works. So that was just really good for me because I've always been on that other side, so it was helpful to have a word for it, like strategic thinking as opposed to planning.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it up because sometimes I think we say, well, we're supposed to be planning. And by the way, we're some boards, but again, if we were committed to the governance core guide, and by the way, on page 30 and 39, it's talking about strategic focus. And in the top of 39 says people often confuse strategic thinking with strategic planning. Strategic thinking refers to the mindset that drives the work of government. It's you're sharing and you're directing your thinking. You end up providing direction through that thinking, but yet it's staff's job to then go back and pull the plan of that together. And it's interesting because the word trust comes up a lot in organizations like ours. Who do you trust? I don't trust. And again, this is me talking a little bit about an elephant in the room in our district. Well, I don't trust so and so. Well, understand, we go through a whole strategic thinking, strategic planning process that really drives the decisions that are made in our district. And it's yours as a board, along with me, to set that strategic thinking. And then that strategic thinking gets shared to the staff that really do the work around what happens and build the plan. It's the expertise of how much money do we have, which resources can we commit to, right? It's really detail oriented that comes out. And so sometimes I think what's more important is that we understand the structure of strategic thinking is happening here. And actually strategic thinking is happening from lots of directions, right? Because a lot of people share their thinking. We collect thinking as a staff from others. Surveys, collect thinking from staff. We bring that thinking back to you as you're thinking about your thinking and setting the direction. But then it's, now we got to put it into a plan and make it happen.
I just had the thought, what's something that's challenging for me is that we're on the vision level. We're the idealists. We're the building concept, and you're down in the trenches, and you're the ones that have to make the really hard compromises. And sometimes, from my perspective, it's very difficult to see those compromises. But I know that that's essential, and of course, I can't often know even all of that went into that compromise.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that's hard for a lot of people to say. Again, I'm actually interested in being really frank. So for example, your superintendent gets blamed for a reduction of intervention. And actually it's creating this level of not trusting. I've heard this out there. It's like, well, actually your superintendent didn't make set the number for that. It was through a process of looking at what our district's needs were, and resources we have, and where we need to put our money. And so it's through this process. And so for example, somebody might come to you and say, we should have never done that. And then somebody said, well, tell her to do it. You know, that actually happened through a process. We set a strategic thinking, we set a focus, but then we had to go in and had to look at the actual dollars and cents where things happen and where our needs are. And I'll tell you that that's part of the strategic planning. And here's what makes sense is I think we're always planning. And I think you guys are always strategically thinking, right? Because you don't just every year set goals and priorities and then stop talking about it, right? We're always talking about what's the thinking versus the planning. And sometimes in midstream you go, oh, we have some more funding. Can we add something that we didn't have the resources to before? Oh, or, ooh, that's not working like it was expected. Let's not be foolish enough to not continue to strategically think and then strategically plan. So I want to make this.
Yeah, I want to add one other thing to that. I know planning and thinking, that's great. And I believe in it. And I've done many strategic planning as myself. But I think one of the things I would really love to have the opportunity to meet these two guys and talk about some other issues that we're facing now that they didn't face when they wrote the book. But that would be strategic focus. Okay? They overemphasize focus, focus, focus. And I think they're right. That as a board, we have to be very clear about what our mission and vision and have this coherent, well-articulated strategy for achieving the mission and the vision. Last Friday, when I was up there and I got a chance to meet Nicole Anderson, she asked me about our vision and mission. Thank God I had my little booklet and I could open it up and I could read it word for word. she said, and you guys are way ahead of what I was talking to you about. Because, and she said this, your strategic focus, you're getting there. What happens sometimes is the planning and the thinking and the planning and the thinking, but then we forget to focus what's up there. And that's what's got to drive us, okay? If we need to tweak it, change it, or whatever, I'm all in favor of that. But I would add not only strategic thinking, okay, and planning, but I think part of our vocabulary has to be strategic focus.
It has been all their stuff. So,
Yeah, no, it's in the book.
strategically focused. Other thoughts? So, so this moving along in the chapters, just keep our conversation moving along. You know, they talk about deep learning as part of this. I'd refer to it a little bit. But it's really a hard thing to understand, I think, sometimes, because there's so much going on in the school district. And oftentimes board members get asked about things that they don't really know what's going on, and that's kind of embarrassing. But there's so much going on. And I think that what's really important is when we talk about deep learning, it is truly deep learning of what the strategic focus is. And understanding that, you know, we're not in every little decision that's happening. We're not in every little activity that's going on. And I will tell you, as your superintendent, I try to get you information. I feel like, oh my gosh, I can blindside you, right? But every little detail is hard because there's so much happening. You know, the smaller the district, it's a little easier. The bigger the district, it's almost impossible, right? Our district's not tiny. It's small enough to try to make sure I get the information. But I think that what's important to me when we think about deep learning, it's really that you can speak to and know, and that we continue to provide information to you to grow that to these areas that is part of the strategic focus. I just wanted to bring that up because I think sometimes it's a lot of stress, even on me or even on you, when we feel like we have to know everything. Because I gotta tell you, and again, I stress this. I mean, I'm a superintendent that has a broad background of a lot of things, so I've built an expertise. But there's things in the district that I'm not perfect, know everything on. I have to rely on the team. I've got to rely on the experts that we have hired to help make sure that I am in tune. So I just wanted to open that up as a thought. Part of the conversation.
I appreciate what you just said, and I think that that's something that I hope we, you know, as a group, we get more information on this deep learning. Like we learn more about the strategic focus, because when I think about, well, discover and foster the unique talents and potential of all students, you know, how are we doing that? What are the best things that we're doing that are, you know, really helping to foster these children and build their potential, improve their learning, you know, whether it's reading and math, and I know so I know that part of my deep learning, like I can speak when people ask, it's like, you know, elements of the LCAP, you know, where we've got new money, we've set goals, we have things that are things like additional tutoring or the CTE path, or so I feel like I do feel like I'm, you know, learning, and that's part of this deep learning. So I want to continue that process to learn more about it, and to learn and to know, like, you know, this goes back to like the trust versus the learning piece, because, you know, I'll hear things in presentations like, well, we're doing evidence-based, you know, research, or this curriculum is something that, you know, has been researched, it's known to work, you know. So that makes me feel good, right? I don't have to know all the details, but I know that we're choosing, you know, some good things to do, right? And so just more of that information, because I think one of the biggest challenges probably for all of us is like, you know, how do we know we're doing the right thing? You know, like we've set the goal, we want kids to read, we want kids to be able to function in the world and do math and find their unique talents, and we're throwing all these things up on the wall, you know. I mean, we kind of, you know, we've sent you off to do it, but we want to learn, you know. I think as a board, we want to hear back, you know, how is it working? And how do we know that when we made that choice, or when the staff made a choice to do something, that they were really thoughtful about that? And that, to me, that's what I think deep learning is for a trustee, is that you got to bring us along, because we aren't the experts, and we need to kind of understand that this is the approach, and it does align with our strategic focus.
See, I absolutely, number one, thank you for listening to what I said, and absolutely other additional conversation, because I think what's so important about that is that we as staff have to plan for that with you, right? And so, for example, in your December, we'll actually do an update on the LCAP activities. We will really in depth about what we have been doing, what we have, and what data we're looking at collecting to determine. Because again, I think it's very important to be in essence data driven, not just to be data driven, but to determine if the results are what we want them to be. The one thing I always caution is that it's not necessarily a fast game. This is there's a kind of methodical process to it. And so information comes not like boom, 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 but it comes methodically over time. And I think that's part of it, going back to your role, is to be hearing that and then providing your strategic thinking so that we know where that thinking is as a whole. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I feel like with the deep learning, it's not realistic for everybody to have deep learning on everything. But as trustees, I think it's important that we are trusters in our staff. I mean, I have to rely on, like you were saying, you're highly educated in certain things being a superintendent. I know things in different parts of our daily life that you don't know. And so for me, I feel like this is the deep learning aspect is where we do trust our staff. It's I mean, we're all human. And this is the industry of learning. So with learning comes failure and success. So if something isn't working, it can be tweaked or completely wiped out and a new avenue. Like that's all part of trustees trusting.
How would you say that trusters? Trustees can be trusters. I love that.
I must confess, I found this the most distressing section. So I believe that we are living through a fundamental transformation of society, which has been accelerated by COVID, which was initiated largely by the internet and computing. And most institutions are very slow to respond. I thought to myself, have we been imaginative enough about what it is that our students that are in the buildings right now are going to be coping with? One of the workplace that I see in even young people creating right now is so fundamentally different. And when you talk to employers around town, they're experiencing a fundamental culture shift in the area of work. Are we really giving our students the dispositions, attitudes, and deep, complex skills that are so essential? So I was concerned about that because our focus can often be a backwards look. We are fixing the problems that are of the last 2 decades. And in the process of fixing that, we may be entirely setting up the problems for the next 2 decades. So this was my fundamental concern. And then of course, when I turned the page and it got to be the global competencies, I'm thinking, that's the Viking vision that I've been asking to extend throughout the district this whole time. Here's a portion of what I'm concerned about that we're missing. And as we are thinking about basic skills and so on, I watch my daughter, she doesn't read very well. She has issues. She has a million strategies. She just doesn't read. So she, finds something to read to her, or she gets a video, and she does very well. So I'm wondering if it's like learning to handwrite or learning to spell was a couple of decades ago, that an overemphasis on even basic skills. And I know this is a dangerous thing to start talking about, but that in the end, maybe that is not the ticket to success that we think that it is. Anyway, that's all. Go.
I actually 100% agree with you. Like like everyone learns differently. Like I really wish this was an Audible book as well. I mean, and I've Googled it. There's because I like to read and listen. But I was really, when I was discussing the future and that school districts, need to get with the times, like, I really was thinking, one of the things I hear a lot to the community, actually everywhere I go, not just in Tahoe, we talk about how when I was like in middle school, we had home ec, which started actually in the 5th grade, like we were baby in the 5th grade. And we don't have those classes now. I know you have like, what, 5th grade? Yeah, I grew up in a tiny little mountain town, but it's, yeah, we have home ec up until from 5th grade to a freshman. And so for me, like, we don't have that. So sometimes I sit there and think, we're so advanced in, coding or whatever, all these new science and math and all the programs that we have, but where are basic life skills? Where's economic, home ec, I mean. And it's like, those are part of the whole child. And so, I don't know, I just feel like I would wish we had, a class like that for our students. Just one thing I didn't say.
I actually would love to hear a futures thinker, and someone that's really outside the box, address all of us at some point to give us just throw some things at the wall. What's coming? One of the things at the beginning of the facilities meeting, by the consultant, he said, well, it's a good thing we've come out of COVID and buildings are still relevant. And I had this huge mind shift of like, that was a possibility. And it still might happen.
Yeah, so let me tell you what we've just done. We stepped away from the book club.
Yeah, we did.
And what we did was we provided some strategic thinking. Right? So what we did is we started providing remember, you're a team, and you start providing strategic thinking, and eventually that strategic thinking towards a consensus, the unity of direction. That unity of direction then tells me to go do strategic planning, right? So in essence, if I go back, strategic focus as well, because what happens when we get some strategic thinking happening, sometimes we go all over the place. And so but something you said earlier, which is so accurate in my opinion, is I listen to all of you very carefully. And that thinking gets built into how I start to think, okay, I know this is important to Trustee Kemper. I know this is important to President. I know this is so on and so forth. Think about it. I will tell you, one of the challenges with innovative thinking is that people fight change, right? And so that's my challenge.
Just to sort of bring us full circle here a little bit. We've only read two chapters, but my gist of what we've read, if you're going to say, okay, out of the first 2 chapters, sort of what's the theme of these chapters? It's about being, as a board member and as a board, being well-informed, focused, and engaged in mutual endeavor of trustees and superintendents. And I think we've made that movement. The thing that I look at as far as deep learning, and I consider myself a lifelong learner. I read all the time, I research stuff, blah, 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 is that if we do a good job of trying to sort of self-educate ourselves in certain subjects that we don't know a lot about and so forth and so on, but deep learning will prepare us to lead rather than simply respond to pressures. Because what happens is we get confronted and someone says something to us and we really don't know a lot about that subject. So now how do we react? Okay, well, our job is to go out and find the information and get it back to the person and so forth and so on. But I think what everyone has to come to grips with is that deep learning has to be part of this habit that we're talking about as far as governance. And that's going to be to read, to look at data, to look at evidence, and so forth and so on. And from there, make those good decisions and ask questions. Your point was a great point, Lori. How do we know this is working? Give me the evidence. Show me. Okay. Do I have to go sit in a classroom and see how this is being done and so forth and so on? And those are options. Your idea about bringing somebody from a Toffler from the 21st century and so forth and so on and talk to us. I have no problems. But in the same token, I think that as a group, if we find something that doesn't work, let's get rid of it. And then let's try to find something that does work. And then we work with him and he works with the experts to get this stuff done, and it's on the board. It's that simple. It's just a system.
Yeah, same with this concept of where you get information. It's our job to provide information. And it's our job, and I hope that you're seeing that on our, bringing information, an effort to say what we're doing, inform you about things. If it's towards action, it's that it's really trying to make sure you've got enough information before we ask you to take action. It's interesting in the chapter, and we've had lots of conversation. I'm on page 45, second paragraph. One of the trust's most valuable activities is to take the time to visit schools. A well-organized, well-intentioned visit will often benefit both the trustees and the staff. But now there are some cautions, which
Yeah, but
I was thankful when I read the cautions, right? This is actually the second time I read the book in a couple of years. It's like, okay, because, just dropping in, it warns you about that. It's strategic. Think about, hey, what do I want to learn about? Geez, in the boardroom, we've heard about this. I'd like to go see that, right? That's part of, in essence, now.
Let me add to that, because I think that's really an important point. When I read that, I wrote down next to it, there's no investigations here, okay? If you taught, I taught, Bonnie taught, if you thought a school board member was there to investigate, you just clammed up, okay? You aren't going to say anything because you don't know what you don't what their agenda is. And so I think that's a really, really good point, that I think visiting schools and watching kids, let's say Tahoe Valley, they're working really hard on reading, maybe go visit, maybe as a group we go and visit, I don't care, whatever. And we get to see what they're doing, okay? And that's part of our sort of deep learning.
Yeah, and as you pass that over, I was going to say, that's what's so important to me to highlight this, is that when you hear from somebody, that person's not doing a very good job, I'm gonna go. So, no, that's where you share, hey, Tom, this is what we told about this or that, the other, and some of you done it in person. But it's when you go, you know what, we have a presentation on X, I want to out there and see that.
Mine's a question. So it says it's a benefit to the board and staff. Would you please describe for us what you think are the benefits to staff of the board visiting?
I think that, well, the first and most important thing to me, I think, is that you guys are the representatives. I think that there's a sense of that you care when you come up. As long as you're not invested. Yes. Right? Is that you care to see them, you care to see what's going on in the classroom, to support the education. And I also think that it says when you do that when you're in here making decisions, you're in tune with what's going on. And that tells us. I've been cautious because what I didn't want to have happen is the dysfunction of business, right? Like just showing up and dropping in on something we're not going to do, or having that mindset of, well, we'll go see if people like such and such, or so and so. When you go in with that mindset of investigation, it can be very dangerous. So that's why my first year was a little cautious about how we set that up. And now the second year saying, hey, no, you don't need me to be with you. If I can, that'd be great. So we can learn together and see it together. So we have a follow-up conversation. But really, it's really about getting out there and seeing the things that you've decided in here strategically. That's my thing.
So I have to say for myself, I'm often reluctant because I feel like I'm taking staff time, administrative time, which is so valuable. And yet when I'm walking around by myself, I don't even know if they know who I am. And sometimes they don't. And so I feel awkward doing that. Like, who's this woman that just showed up at my door? So I never, would you give us some guidelines on what the ideal visit might look like?
Sure. And we've been working through this over the last year now. I feel as though we've been talking about it. I really don't think we should just stop in and walk. Because then you aren't necessarily specifically strategically looking at things you want to see. So, number one, I think that we need to let the administrator know, make sure that it's time works for them, and they are busy people, so it's not like all the time, right? It's thinking, and so, it's saying, hey, Todd, I want to go see this that we approved in the, I want to go see it in action. It would be the best place to go see it. Or, I'd like to see how it's working in a few schools or whatever. Then, which we've done different ways with all of you. For example, one trustee has been emailing directly to the principal, CC me, and then the principal and I actually do, just so you know, have an offline conversation about their stress, their time, and say, okay, and I'll actually tell the principal, go ahead and respond, but that trustee know this time would be good. So I tell you that just moving around from room to room just isn't the most strategic, right? It's about really being specific about, hey, we've heard about this in the boardroom, or we made this decision in the boardroom. I want to go see. That's what I'd say is the most effective.
I think that one of the things I've been doing lately, and this goes back to what you said about benefiting staff, which includes the administrators, is I've been enjoying the weekly newsletters from the administrators. And so sometimes my visits have been related to something I've read, right? So whether it was the play at Tahoe Valley or the meet, I think Cindy Martinez talked about Monday mornings, they do the circle with the kids and kind of check in. It's part of the social emotional learning. I haven't gotten to witness that yet because the day I wanted to go, that wasn't happening. But that's the kind of, to me, that's a good way for a trustee to show interest in something that the administrator has highlighted, something important to them that they're seeing is working. And so that's a way of sort of caring for them, and giving them like, hey, they notice that we're paying attention, and then you can go take a look at something they are highlighting.
And I think that gets back to
Mhm.
your question, Justin. Staff being careful, I think one thing you value that you want to see something that they're. I just stress that remember the strategic focus. And then also really want to learn about, I want to see that, like, it actually being done out there, not just working on. I remember the board, we were 401, we said we'd be an hour. I don't want to, someone maybe have a chance for any final thoughts or comments, but I wanted to make sure we did again. I think that actually, Trustee Mansfield highlighted the last part, which is manner. And I just want to stress that as we build this governance mindset, this governance core focus, is that your manner does matter, right? The way you take a tone, body language, the way that you speak with one another, and it really does make a difference. As we operate with kindness with one another, we build this team. Just always keep it. I just want to make sure we highlight that as part of the chapter. And yes, of course, we got the Thanksgiving a little bit. So, Mr. President, it is fast time. I don't mind if we go a little long. Doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to make sure we are.
Okay, so we will now
Mr.
go,
President, before you close,
well, I'm not closing, but go ahead.
What's also on the agenda?
Oh, yeah, I've got to ask you for public comment.
Was there any other, can we just do that?
You want to do a wraparound? Go ahead. Go
Is
ahead.
there any final thoughts?
Go ahead. You have anything to say?
No, I don't.
Bonnie, anything else?
The only thing to add is that when I thought about manners, I was thinking primarily of the board meeting. I later realized it extends to social media and a million other avenues that we communicate.
Having a camaraderie kind of thing is so important. All staff, and this is our little group here. And that I was concerned about and everything else. I would love to just have everybody over for pizza. Or just like hang out, watch Monday Night Football and eat pizza. Just kind of hang out. I like it.
Just so you know, we can be together. We just, but when we're not in a board meeting or boardroom, or it's not agenda, you just cannot talk about this. That's the stress, right? You just can't even cross that line ever, because that's what people will accuse you of. So absolutely, you can be together socially, you can get together out and about, just have to refrain from discussing business. Mr. President.
Well, let's see if Ms. Bannister has anything to say. No? Okay, then.
I think that's it, thank you.
Okay, okay. Let me find this and we'll get it going. Okay, so let us then move from board professional development workshop back to communication from the public. Dr. Keller, do we have any public comment?
You know, I'm just gonna double check because.
Yes, you never know.
Make sure I didn't miss anything. Ms. Chandler was out today, so. Miss anything that should be important. President, I believe we have no public comment.
Okay. It is 4:04 and I'm, want to get ready. I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
All right, thank you guys.
What's that?